Welcome back. Canada could begin airstrikes against ISIS targets in Syria any day now. Parliament approved the expansion and the extension of Canada's mission on Monday night. The next day, the government sent a letter to the United Nations making its legal case for the mission. But what's at stake for Canadian pilots involved in the fight? And there are reports today that Canada is considering sending military advisors to Ukraine to help with the ongoing crisis in that country. What options are on the table to fight Russian aggression in Eastern Europe? And where is that conflict headed? Joining me now here in the studio, James Bezan, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Defence, the NDP's defence critic Jack Harris, and Joyce Murray, the Liberal defence critic. Thanks for coming in, all of you. Reports today, James, about the prospects that Canada would send trainers, military trainers, into Ukraine, eastern Ukraine, to help train people there. What can you tell us about this?
Well, we're considering all our options, and as you know, we have signed a memorandum of understanding with Ukraine on military cooperation. As well, we are now part of the U.S. Ukraine Joint Commission on Military Reform and Cooperation, and so in that we've already committed to providing training for military police, and so all options are on the table. We are wanting to ensure that Ukraine can fight this Russian aggression. We denounce Putin's continued intervention here, and so we are going to support Ukraine.
So the options are what's the factors that what factors are you weighing here?
Well, everything's on table on this, and so training is just one of those aspects that we're looking at right now, but no decisions have been made.
All right. Jack, what do you make of this?
What I make of that is the kind of statements that we just heard. This is a rhetorical battle that the government of Canada is playing. You know, NATO has agreed, and we agree, that it's in the best interest of Ukraine to have a quality military force. NATO has set up trust funds to help them do that. Individual countries such as Canada and others are providing help to do that. This is a medium-term plan. This is not arming the Ukrainians to fight back against the Russians in eastern Ukraine or to take back Crimea. That's not what this is about. This is about helping the long-term stability of Ukraine, which absolutely needs a lot of help. So we're in favor of that. But we're not in favor of this. All options on the table. We're about to strike against Russia because we are not.
Did I say that? That's not what I said at all. I said that we're looking at all the options.
You said all options were on the table.
And if you look at what the memorandum, of understanding
like a
says,
bombing campaign.
Well, geez,
all
Jack,
options.
Jack,
okay.
When we're talking about Ukraine, we're talking about Russian aggression. We're going to help the Ukrainians every way that we possibly can.
But this
and
is
right
a rhetorical battle.
No, that's not a rhetorical battle. We are looking at all options, and this military issue is just part of that. And we will proceed as we see fit and as it works into the overall plans of Ukraine.
Nobody else
is
talking
has given
like
more
that, nobody else is talking like that.
From the standpoint of assistance to Ukraine, we've already given over $500,000 of financial aid and non-lethal military aid.
Okay, what do you think the signal is if there's a military training presence in Ukraine?
Well, I think it's important that we are in lockstep with our NATO partners. The Liberal Party is a very strong supporter of Ukraine and its territorial integrity. We have pushed the government to do more in terms of the sanctions and some of the individuals around Mr. Putin, more than they've actually done. I think we have to be very careful as to what we do signal, and so that's why going forward with NATO partners is an important parameter. It's an important constraint.
There's so much to cover with so little time. I want to switch to Syria because Canada did send a note to the UN today saying it was going to exercise its right to collective self-defense on behalf of Iraq by extending its air missions into Syria. But a lot of confusion this week, James, about why we were doing it. Is it because we have a certain kind of precision-guided missile or not? Even the chief of the defense staff, Tom Lawson, seemed a bit confused. What happened here?
Well, there was, unfortunately, not all the information was available when this discussion started. But regardless, that's not the reason why we're going to Syria. We're going to Syria because...
Then why did Jason Kenney say that was the reason we were going?
No, it was just part of the context. It was an interesting point of fact that he laid out there, that we do have... we do have precision-guided munitions that can target dynamic moving targets. And that Americans figured that would be something that would be useful in theater. Now, we're going there because ISIL has started consolidating their fighting force, their heavy artillery, and their munitions in Syria around their capital city of their caliphate, Raqqa. And for that reason, that's why we're going there. And we want to make sure that ISIL has no safe haven from where they can launch terrorist attacks on Iraq or on Canada or any of our allies.
Well, there's nothing in what Mr. Bezan just said that actually is true. I mean, you know, they talked about how they've moved heavy weapons into Syria. Well, the whole bombing campaign said that we've managed to stop ISIL from being able to move. They can't move any equipment. They can't make any advances. Right. So how do they move all this heavy equipment back in Syria, where they were already, by the way? And, you know, the idea that that was just an interesting fact that we were the only ones with precision-guided munitions. All of the countries that are engaged in this, all 13 of them have precision-guided missiles. They use nothing else.
So do you think it was just a mistake, or that this was...
Well, I think, you know, Mr. Kenney is out there on a very big limb, and he's been out on various times before. We had it a few weeks ago when he suggested that there was a buzzing of the Canadian forces by a Russian jet, which was proven to be wrong, and NATO had to correct him. Look, Mr. Kenney loves to gild the lily. He loves to use all the rhetoric, and he's got to get down to doing his job, which is actually find out whether what he's being told is actually the truth. I think we've got enough misinformation about this to really stop trusting information coming from this government about what's really going on.
One quick question for Joyce, but we're there. Canada is there now. So what's the big? How does the Liberal government or Liberal Party pursue this issue of whether we should be there, or how do we keep our pilots safe, for example?
Well, I love the Liberal government statement that you just made there, Chris.
I'll be hearing about that, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, keeping our pilots safe, of course, we always have the well-being of men and women of the armed forces at heart, and we do have questions as to whether the government has actually given advance notice to Syria of where these pilots will be, so there isn't an inadvertent attack by the Syrian government. But actually, I think the key issue here is the confusion that's been happening, and that's one of the reasons the Liberals said that it is not in the national interest to go into a bombing combat mission in Syria when there is so much confusion. And I just would like to add that this minister is in a position that really Canadians expect serious, responsible behavior, and we have to question whether this minister has the maturity and the responsibility for the job that he has been charged with. And just one other aspect to that is this is a minister who provided no cost estimates when the essential debate and vote was happening on expanding the combat mission to Syria. Turns out he had those cost figures. Turns out that he actually leaked it on a conference call to select groups without informing Parliament or the public. And I find that very concerning that he would hide the information from Parliament. What is he trying to do? Keep Parliament and Canadians in the dark and feed the information to a few friends on a conference call? Totally not acceptable.
Look, Minister Kenney has been very transparent, accountable, and has been out there talking to everyone. We have all the information here now, and it's all was available.
But not when we were debating this. Not when we were debating this. That's when we needed it.
We didn't have all the details at the time.
He had the details. He was leaking them to select groups
precision-guided munitions and dynamic targeting. But I can tell you that on the issue of the costing, he did release that on a press conference that was available to the media, and that question never came up when he was in the House. I don't recall any of the opposition members getting up in the debate when we were discussing the motion.
In the interest of transparency, when will these bombing missions now begin, do you think?
Well, as we heard today in the technical briefing that was provided by National Defense, is that they're working now with the U.S. Air Command and our coalition partners, looking at what targets are out there, and everything is in place for them to begin bombing as soon as the right targets are out.
Okay. We only have a limited amount of time, and I want to talk a little bit about Iran. A big news coming out of Europe today that there is a general framework agreement in which Iran will reduce the number of the equipment that it has to produce nuclear fissionable material, all part of the brokerage attempts by the P5+1, they're called. And in return, the EU and the Americans are saying that they will start easing back on sanctions. Conservative government's been very critical of this, doesn't trust the Iranian government. What's your reaction?
Well, we want to see what all the documentation is first and foremost, and making sure that the P5+1 is getting all the nuclear aspects. deliberations.
Would Canada consider easing sanctions?
If there is on the table all of the criteria that we have, which is that their nuclear capability and their aspirations become a nuclear armed nation, and to use it against Israel, we won't. If they are going down that path, finally and honestly, actually demilitarizing their nuclear program, then I think we'd consider it. But until then, we're going to be very conscientious and skeptical of the outcome here.
I think we've got to recognize here, despite Canada being kind of an outlier on this, they didn't want to be part of the negotiation. They wouldn't participate in trying to solve the Syrian problem because Iran was at the table. We're really backed off on all of this. So they don't trust France, they don't trust Germany, they don't trust the EU, they don't trust
them. I don't trust the Iranians.
So the NDP would say that we should ease the sanctions against Iran?
What I'm saying is that sounds to me like substantial progress if these countries and entities in the European Union have said that they've got a deal that they can support, then I think that's progress and we should recognize it.
I was so pleased when I saw this announcement. I mean, think of how we would feel right now if it was the opposite and the announcement was that these talks have fallen apart. So yes, there's more work to be done, but I'm very delighted, and diplomacy is a very important part of keeping the peace in our democracy.
I'll have to leave it there. Thank you all. James Bezan, Jack Harris, Joyce Murray. Have a great break.
Happy Easter.
Thank you.